Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, come on, guys. Good afternoon. Good. I'm from South Georgia, so I need energy. It's a call worship situation at Amen Corner over here. So I'm Christopher Coes, director of Locust. We're well, I thought it was going to work. Okay, maybe not. I was going to walk around and get you guys engaged and stuff, so I'm going to be stuck here at this podium. But I run a national organization called Locust. It's Latin for place. I represent about 250 real estate development companies and investment companies across the country who build walkable urban development. Okay, so I know many of you guys gave me a little side eye right there because you're like, why is a developer coming in here? You guys are causing displacement gentrification. I would like to go on record and say that I generally work for what I call the good guys. These companies that you see here are members of our national steering committee members. We essentially call ourselves triple bottom line developers. So yes, we care about profit because you can't do development without making a buck. But we also care about the environment. So we're very big on climate change. We know that the only way we're going to solve the climate dilemma that we have globally is not through retrofitting our cars. It's actually change the way we live. And those who know the statistics, those who live in walkable areas, have about a 75% lower greenhouse gas emission than those who live in drivable suburban areas. So again, if you really want to change and save the planet, we need to live more in compact, walkable urban places. And by the way, those type of development actually create better health outcomes, great equitable outcomes, and the list goes on and on and on. Well, with that being said, I think a lot of conversation has been coming up about, transit. Well, you guys have been just by a show of hands, how many guys are actually transportation planners? Okay, a large group. How many are just simply advocates here locally or regionally? Show of hands. Okay, how many of you are actually in the development industry? Gwen has her hand halfway up. Now, if I did not call in your industry, can you just shout out besides students or something? Shout it out real quick, just so I know who's in the room. Government. Nonprofit. Public engagement. Project management. Okay, that's a good cross section. I saw a lot of hands with the transportation planners, and luckily for you guys, I think you're living in what I like to call now the beginning of the golden age. For the past, probably before the late 1990s, right? You were putting a lot of transportation investments, primarily transit, in place, and not really seeing anything really happen other than, hey, we want to make sure that certain communities have better access and better mobility. But now you're sitting in a situation where every time you even consider putting a transit stop, you now have, whether it's San Francisco, even here in Portland, New York, places like Kansas City, places that are putting in transit or creating walkable urban places are seeing massive economic investment. This is our golden age. It's what those who build the federal highways and the state DOTs, when they did and they put in a highway system, they're like, great, we're going to get a regional mall and it's going to be great for our community, we're going to create economic. We're in an age of walkability. Now here's the issue. Meaning, as you know, we haven't really been building transit at the frequency and at the need that we should have been for the past 60 years. We've actually been going in the reverse. Now, the market has changed. Now, I normally have a whole series of slides that talks about baby boomers downsizing, talk about young people like me who are now saying, I'm tired of texting and driving and drinking and driving. I'm going to walk and text and walk and drunk and all that good stuff and be drunk. And so you have a situation, I normally show that to only demonstrate that this is a macro issue that you in the transportation industry are now faced with. Okay, that now every time you sit behind your desk or go out and walk in a community and think about where the next transportation asset goes, you now have found yourself that people are clamoring for that. So in places that already had it, places that maybe have been for the past 60 years disinvested, are now the prime places for this demographic, for this market shift to go. And we've now seen in less than 20 years, those same places, whether it's DC, Atlanta, a lot of these places are just literally just changing right in front of you because there was this pent up demand. Now the question is, as transportation planners, as advocates, as community engagement, you're saying, okay, for the next transit lines that we're building, we see that there's so much pent up demand. How do we manage that? And so this is the conversation we are having with our members. As I said before, these guys are in their golden age. It's been a long time since walkable urban development actually was making the price points that they have. And I can give you a whole bunch of statistics, but the main one you should know, we measured the top 30 metro areas across the country, compared their walkable urban places to their drivable suburban places, meaning, how many of you guys know walk score? Okay, good. If you lived in a place that was regionally significant, that had about at least over 300,000 square feet of commercial office, and you had a walk score of over 70, that walkable neighborhood had a price premium of about 73% over that metropolitan equivalent of a drivable suburban neighborhood. That's what you're up against right now. Now, all these guys are happy, but we also recognize that in our development projects, we do not want to bring the suburban stock, look, and feel into the urban context. Why? Because we have learned through all of our market research of young people and baby boomers is that one of the major reasons, besides walkability and accessibility, that people are moving back into these unique, quality, walkable neighborhoods is because of culture. It's because of sense of community. And so now we're finding ourselves like, we don't want Quiznos. We want the mom and pop store that everyone used to go to. In DC is a perfect example. They're on the U Street corridor. It was quite known for the best Ethiopian 9th Street corridor. It was best known for Ethiopian food. A lot of people went there. People went to U Street because it was where Black Renaissance actually was birthed. But now, a lot of developers are saying, finding hard to figure out how can we keep those local businesses that have been the landmarks, that is attracting the market. How do we keep it here? So you have a lot of things going on. So with that, I gave a speech along with my colleague Chris Lineberger, who's the former president of Locust, back in 2014, recognizing that, you know what? We can't become the victims, we being the real estate industry, of our own success. And so we need to figure out a way, and as Jillian pointed out, there are a lot of tools that the city is doing, there are tools that local advocates are doing, but it's actually not moving the needle. And we had to take a stand back and say, from the private sector side, what can we do to actually solve this, or at the very least, provide a different paradigm of how we think about this. A lot of some of the comments I've been hearing both here today, at this panel and in other places, is that gentrification is the big bad wolf. Our view is that gentrification is not the problem. It's the fact that gentrification is not managed, which leads to displacement. Every community I've went to is not mad that they got a new coffee shop. They're not mad that they got a new sidewalk. What they're mad about is the fact that no one came in and asked them and helped them figure out how they can leverage that, how to make their lives better. And I think that's where we, as a private sector, want to put ourselves. And so what I'm going to spend just a few minutes, because I want to get to the Q&A portion, because we have a lot of experts here who have a lot of experiences. But I really want to just talk about one case study that we basically said, we're going to get our hands dirty. We're going to go in and see if we can figure it out and see what we learn, what we can learn from this, and see if it's replicable across the country. And so with that, in 2014, Locust launched what is called the Attainable Housing and Social Equity Initiative, because we believe that right now the biggest issue we have in this country is that everyone wants to live, a lot of people want to live in walkable urban places, but they can't, because we're not building fast enough and we're not leveraging the economic growth that's coming. In addition to that, you can't talk about economic growth without linking it directly with social equity. And those two has to be a feedback loop. And we found immediately that the city doesn't have time to look at the place. It doesn't have time to manage a neighborhood. But we actually had a model on the economic side through business improvement districts, where we like to say if you're a director of a BID or a CID, you are the local mayor. You're thinking about that community 24/7 to increase its economic output. But who's the equivalent of that person on the social equity side? And what we found is that there was, in many communities, there was not that person, and actually, in our theory, it actually should be the same person. So with that, like I said, our initiative covered both state, federal policy changes, and I won't get into today. A lot more market-based, place-based research needs to be done. But most importantly, what I'm going to spend time today is a private sector-led initiative to create a place-based management tool for the local community to manage their economic growth. So with that, let me tell you a story about a town called Somerville. Is anyone familiar with this neighborhood by chance? Okay, for those who don't know, it literally is just a couple of miles from downtown Boston. It literally is kind of what you consider a blue-collar, very diverse community, about 1 mile from Kennedy Square in Cambridge. And interesting enough, this particular town, Somerville, is serviced by a heavy rail station that's you probably can't see it here, but it's pretty much a couple miles up north to Assembly Row. However, the key thing here is that prior to the new transit investment that's been coming in, Somerville, because Boston Metro, particularly that part of Boston, is very walkable, they were already experiencing increases in property value and all the issues that we've been talking about today, long before what is now a new Green Line extension, which was, and you probably know this from your own work, a transit stop that was been promised for like 30 years and now is coming on the docks, right? So the question here is that the city of Somerville is literally what I like to say, it's on a brink of transformation. The Somerville today, which is a massive concentration of small makerspace, artists, high concentration of Latino community, small business owners, a very, very diverse, very connected community is literally on the verge of actually becoming the next Cambridge, becoming the next Kendall Square. And why? Because those individuals who are in those same markets, those college students who want to still be in the Boston area are looking for great affordable places to locate. And on top of that, Somerville just completed well, before I give you that, and on top of the fact that they're now going to build, as you see here, this little place right here, a new Green Line extension called Union Square. And so this is kind of like their cue that they need to do something, they need to plan something, and they know, so with that, with a new Green Line extension, they kick-started a whole new comprehensive zoning. They did a whole neighborhood planning process, which essentially will call for 3 million new square feet of development, supposed to bring several thousand worth of jobs. Of course, again, transformational. Just kind of give you an idea, listen, they have a Green Line station coming. There's a lot of industrial land, and so when it comes to displacement, it's not truly people who are living there. It's actually a lot of vacant land that's being created, being converted. However, it's the price points that are now being the driving factor of the displacement right now. In addition to that, a lot of the buildings is not historic. There's not like a lot of character to the community. But with that being said, this is what the community really was looking for. Like, we have a new Green Line extension. We have about 400 acres of new development, about 1,800 new jobs. But it was going to require major water, road improvements. And I'm sorry you can't see that at the bottom. But essentially, this is going to be a big multimodal center for them. So again, the Green Line extension is their new focal point in this community. Now, one of the things I started off with is that I'm not an opponent to, quote, gentrification, because I believe, again, investment into community is a good thing, but I am a huge proponent for managed gentrification. And one of the things is if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. And one of the things that we did a couple of years ago was do what is called walk-up, wake-up call. I'm sorry, it's walk-up. It should be walk-up, wake-up report. And essentially, it was a full analysis of the Boston metropolitan region. And essentially, we took the entire land square miles of Boston Metro, including all the surrounding suburbs, and divided it up into like 4 quadrants. The main quadrant was whether it's walkable versus drivable suburban, and if it was local serving or regionally significant. Local serving meaning bedroom communities. Regionally significant, high concentration of jobs. And through that, we were able to give each of those neighborhoods, particularly those that are walkable, a economic score. So from copper all the way to platinum, if you guys know LEED, we kind of borrowed that for them. And also, one of the first times ever, we actually gave neighborhoods a social equity ranking, measuring jobs, accessibility, and a couple other items. And one of the things that we found was that you kind of actually divide the world into 2 worlds. Walkable urban places that had high opportunity but low social equity, which you could probably expect is like downtown Boston. But then you had communities that had not so good economic opportunity in terms of job creation, job access, but had enormous social equity, great affordability, great access to transit. And so we found ourselves, now how do we all know the trend. As you bring more economic energy into a community, the social equity goes down. So the question is, how do we actually level that pendulum out where you actually are able to manage it so? And one of the things we saw in Somerville, although it was not included in our initial report, was that Somerville had a silver economic rating, had good house pricing, but it also had a silver social equity, had a great affordability, but it had lacked transit. And what we knew in this case is that as soon as the Green Line station opens, the economic ranking was going to go through the roof, and that the housing affordability was going to go down. Thank you. So with that, I have a 2-minute mark, so you're going to hear the Christopher Coes lightning show. You ready? We posed the community one simple question. With all this new development that's coming to town, what do you want to look like? Okay? That was essentially it. Before you bring a transit stop, you have to have a conscious affordable housing plan. I actually like to modify that because that's normally my talking point. You actually have a plan of what you want to be. What do you want to look like? No matter who it is, whatever happens. And so with that, we kind of broke down the goal of the pilot into 4 categories. We wanted to see the intersection between the economic development that was coming and the social equity. We wanted to actually work directly with the community to articulate not just your community benefits agreement. No. Let's take a step back. What do we need to do to make your community awesome and great, whether it's economically or social equity? And from there, we then found out that you could have a conversation about, well, we may need more density. We may need more concentration. And so from that was the second goal. Then the third goal was essentially, we want to create an action plan to say, look, this is what we need to do to maintain either maybe go from silver economically to gold, or how to increase our social equity from silver to platinum. This is the plan that we're going to implement to get there. And then the last piece is, as I said before, we believe one of the issues that we're seeing across the country is that one of the reasons why displacement is happening and a lot of the energy and anger we're seeing is people feel like they don't have control of the situation. And what we find is that a lot of localities, state government, federal government, they don't have resources to think about this or manage this stuff on a 24-hour basis. So we actually have to go down to the place level and give the community and the city and the state a framework and a mechanism to do this and manage this, and actually be able to have a conversation about the trade-offs on a 24/7 basis. So as I said before, I only have 1 more minute. This is really kind of give you a snapshot of all the other things that were going on, and I really just want to focus on, here's our section. What was interesting about our process compared to your tradition, I heard someone say community engagement. Oftentimes, community engagement processes are very long, very consensus building. One of the things that we wanted to do differently, because we're the private sector, we actually wanted to come in and actually say we're data-driven and we have a decision tree that's actually quick. Meaning we have the opportunity, you don't have to mull over, make a decision, reassess, come back, tweak later. Reassess, make a decision, come back, tweak later. New data informs that. So we had a shorter timeline, and I'll talk about the challenges of that or the advantage or disadvantage of that. But this just gives you a snapshot of all the other planning process that actually was going on at the same time. This is just a nice, cute flyer that we kind of showed around the city about come and participate. And so with that, the process was this. We did not invite everyone to be around the decision-making table. That was a conscious decision because we wanted individuals who had decision-making authority in the neighborhood to actually increase housing. We wanted people who had decision-making authority who can actually improve health or education or job opportunities in the community. We wanted those individuals who can actually direct resources or actually be able to connect to those resources at the decision-making table. It's not to say that the public was not a part of the process, but what we wanted to do is target strategy leaders, because these are the individuals who are actually doing the work every day, but we find in a lot of communities, they're in silos. And we wanted them at the table, hearing from other individuals who are working in this community to make it better, to actually begin to decide how they can actually cross-collaborate, share resources, and actually come to an action plan. So we identified about 30 strategy leaders who fit this. We gave them what is called strategy cards. What do you want your community to be? And it was basically ranged from open space to housing issues. We gave them about 30. They actually took those 30 strategy leaders, took the 35 strategy cards and created 51 based on their own circumstance. Then they got together and actually whittled those 51 down to about 10. 10 key priorities. Now imagine what was their number one priority in this particular community. Any guess? Jobs. Somerville believed that it was already the bedroom community for the entire region. Had a high population, had a high housing stock over affordable housing already, but what they have had in 30 years were new jobs. So what they want is that new development to come in that had commercial space, office space, so that new tenants can actually bring jobs, which means there's maybe less space for housing. Exactly. So now you actually have this conversation. Housing was the second priority. So each of those 30 strategy leaders got into what we call working groups. And based on their own interests or their expertise, they began to develop for those 9, so you see economic development, housing, open space, smart city infrastructure, climate change, and place management. They all got together and actually developed an action plan. And then they brought it back to the full strategy leader group to analyze it, debate it, argue, trade-offs, decide what the cost was. And so from that standpoint, about a couple of months ago, we, as a facilitator, put those action plans together, and basically, here's the total cost of everything that you believe you need to do to achieve the social equity ranking or the economic ranking. But now, let's actually overlay that with how much revenue we believe is actually going to come to the community based on the development that's currently being proposed. And through that, we actually have an interesting conversation about what is the most important thing for you to achieve now versus what you may want to achieve 10 years from now. And so with that, we created an action plan. And I'm just going to, because we're short on time, I want to just show this is what one of the 9 action plan documents looked like. And so as you can see here, they started off with a statement, a principle around housing. And then underneath that, they created major priorities that they needed to achieve during certain sets over the next 5 years. Now, I'll stop there to say, as I mentioned before, there were 5 other processes going on. We had a planning process, we had a zoning process. In addition to that, the city had actually created another group called the CAC to advise them on picking a master plan developer. Okay? So we're basically coming into a situation where nothing was really decided, which was both a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing about it was that the individuals who were participating in the CAC were also people who were participating in the locust process. So then they were actually bringing things from the zoning and the neighborhood plan conversation and filtering it right back and vice versa. Now, what is going to happen? So the document I just showed you before that actually has action items of here's what the community wants. And here's the key thing I want to leave with you guys, is that the idea now is no matter what developer comes to the neighborhood, he knows what he or she has to do. The city, the state, now the federal government knows based on this particular neighborhood what their priorities are and who's responsible for doing it. Now, as you can see here, the process is that we are handing our strategy plan of the community priorities over to the master developer and the city and the CAC to negotiate the community benefits agreement. Because one of the things we found in a lot of other communities that community benefits agreements are not as effective as we think they are because they're not actually tied to an overall strategy. Okay? So with that, I'm just going to give a few highlights. We were very successful in getting the community to articulate what their strategies were, how much it was going to cost, got them to start thinking about their trade-offs. But what we were actually really shocked by is how much the city was going to, how the community was just owning the process, and they were actually running much faster than us. We also were able to deliver the final report, which actually had a major impact on the local zoning, which are things that, as you know, if you're a developer, I'm going to build whatever you tell me to build. So if the community has already planned and has a strategy both for their housing, economic, schools, and then that's codified in the law, it's very hard for me to back out of it or having the situation negotiate. That's where I want to be anyway. And last but not least, the community actually decided, we gave them the idea, but they actually decided, you know what? We want to own this process. And not only do we want to have what we like to call a community quarterback or place management organization, but we want this to have some taxing power. The idea that, hey, there are certain parts of that strategy that the PMO may be responsible for, or it has the responsibility of making sure that the schools are doing certain things, or the universities, or the health organization that's within that place are managing. So with that, I'm going to just end on a couple of challenges. It was very hard to define who is a community member. There was another group out there who is part of what I like to call the representative of the lower income bracket, who really, and oftentimes you see this in a lot of communities, who wanted to become the full representative of the community. And it was very hard to actually manage that, given the fact that you had a lot of other organizations that did not believe that they were the representative of that community. So the question is, how do you bridge the gap for those who generally have the least voice, but are the most vocal, have not only a seat at the table and are represented and are taken care of, but also their voices are not drowning out some of the other macro issues that also may be plaguing the community. And last, and I guess y'all know this, meeting fatigue. And everyone, because we're in a type of jurisdiction like Boston, everyone wants more data. So you can always find a situation, Christopher, I need more data on the economic analysis of blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, really? So with that, I'll stop there. I'm sorry that we ran out of time, but I don't know if we have just maybe 5 minutes to do Q&A, if that's possible.
Yeah,
but thank you again for your attention.
Say all